Some summers leave behind sunburns, others, scars. But that one, the summer Logan took me fishing, left behind something deeper, something I still can't name without my voice catching in my throat. I was 17 then, one of those kids who looked a little too long in the locker room, who smiled too wide at boys who didn't know what it meant. I hadn't told anyone. Not Jake, my best friend since we were 6, not my parents, not even myself, not out loud. But I carried it like a secret carved into my ribs. Jake had one of those families that made mine look beige, loud, outdoorsy, a little rough around the edges. His Uncle Logan was the kind of man you notice the second he walks in. Broad shoulders, weathered hands, a beard that looked carved from cedar. He was a wilderness guide, or something like that. A man who spent more time in tents than in houses. At family barbecues, he'd be the one flipping steaks and barely talking, eyes always somewhere else, like the horizon was whispering secrets only he could hear. I never expected him to remember my name, let alone single me out. It was late July, when Jake mentioned that his uncle was planning a weekend trip to a remote lake. "He does it every year," Jake said, tossing a ball against his garage wall. "Says it clears his head." Then he added, offhandedly, "He asked if you wanted to come." I blinked. "Me?" Jake shrugged. "Yeah. Said you seemed like someone who could use quiet." I remember laughing nervously. Logan had barely spoken, more than 2 sentences to me. Why invite me, and not Jake? Still, something in me said yes before I could stop it. Maybe it was the idea of getting away. Maybe it was the thought of being alone with someone like him, someone who didn't flinch at silence, or the parts of me I was too scared to name. Maybe it was the way Logan had looked at me the last time we crossed paths. Steady, unreadable. Whatever it was, that weekend became the axis. Everything turned on. I didn't know it yet, standing there in Jake's driveway, but the moment I agreed to go, my life had already started to change. I packed like I was going to Mars. 3 flannel shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, bug spray, a flashlight I wasn't sure worked, and enough granola bars to feed a scout troop. My hands shook as I zipped the duffel shut, like I was sneaking off to do something I didn't fully understand. Which, in a way, I was. Jake showed up that morning to say goodbye, slouching against the hood of his dad's old truck with a smug grin on his face. "You sure you're ready for this? Logan's kinda intense," he said, popping open a soda and tossing it to me. "Like, talks to trees more than people intense." I gave a half laugh. "Good to know." "You'll be fine," he added with a shrug. "Just don't try to beat him at cards. He cheats." I smiled, but inside I was spiraling. Why? Me? Why now? Logan pulled up in his old black pickup 10 minutes later, the engine grumbling like it hated mornings. He wore worn jeans and a faded green shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. His eyes, shaded by sunglasses, scanned me for a second, calm, unreadable, before he gave a small nod. "You ready?" I nodded back, trying not to drop my bag. The drive was long. Dust trailed behind us on the back roads like smoke from something burning down. At first, we sat in silence, the kind that didn't feel awkward, just full. The radio played old rock songs I didn't know the names of. Logan tapped the wheel to the beat. He finally broke the quiet halfway through the drive. "So, you and Jake, close?" "Yeah," I said, "since we were kids." "You ever think about college? What comes next?" I hesitated. "Sometimes." He nodded slowly. "Smart. You got a sharp way of looking at things. Quiet, but sharp." Then he asked it, casually, like he was talking about the weather. "Got a girlfriend?" I tensed. "No." He didn't react, just nodded again, eyes still on the road. "Boyfriend?" My throat went dry. "No." A pause. That's fine. He didn't say anything else for a while. Later, just as the sun began to dip behind a ridge of trees, he said softly, "Your friend's dad, Jake's dad, he and I used to fish that lake every summer. Just the two of us." His voice cracked a little at the end. Not enough to break, just enough to notice. "I miss him," Logan said. "He was the only one who ever really saw me. You know?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Something passed between us then. Not words, not looks. Just something. A recognition, maybe. Or a permission I didn't know I was waiting for. The rest of the drive, we didn't speak, but I could feel his presence beside me, quiet, steady, and somehow familiar. And I started to think maybe Jake was wrong. Logan wasn't intense. He was honest. The cabin looked like it had grown out of the forest itself. Timbers grayed by time and weather, moss curling up the sides like nature was trying to take it back. It sat on the edge of a glassy lake, the kind that looked more like a mirror than water, especially in the late afternoon sun. Pines loomed around us, tall and unmoving, their scent thick in the air like earth and memory. Inside, it was simpler than I expected. One room, mostly, a stone fireplace in the corner, a battered couch that sagged in the middle, and a small kitchen with mismatched mugs and chipped plates stacked neatly in open shelves. Books lined the windowsills, dog-eared, sun-bleached, most of them about nature or survival. The place smelled like pine needles, old leather, and something warm I couldn't quite place, like the ghost of a fire long since put out. "Make yourself at home," Logan said, tossing his keys into a bowl by the door. "We'll fish early tomorrow. Water's best at dawn." That evening, he showed me how to rig a fishing line on the wooden dock that stretched out into the lake. He stood close behind me, guiding my hands. His fingers brushed mine, calloused, and rough but careful. His touch wasn't lingering, but it wasn't casual either. There was something in it. Intentional, steady, and warm enough to make my breath catch. "You're a quick learner," he murmured as I cast the line. "You listen." No one had ever said that to me before. Later, after we cleaned up and the stars came out in sheets, we sat by the fireplace. Logan poured himself a shot of whiskey and handed me a soda from the cooler. The fire crackled between us, painting his face in flickering orange and gold. He leaned back, staring into the flames, like they were speaking to him. "You ever feel like you're pretending?" he asked suddenly. "Like you're walking through life wearing someone else's skin?" I looked at him, startled. Then I nodded. "All the time." He took a slow sip of his drink, eyes not leaving the fire. "I used to think I'd settle down. One day. Buy some land. Maybe find someone who could stand the quiet. But life doesn't always make room for people like me." "People like you?" I asked. He gave me a small, tired smile. "People who don't fit into boxes. Who don't walk the straight lines laid out for them." The fire popped loudly, and for a moment neither of us said anything. "I tried once," he said after a while, "to be what I was supposed to be. Got close, too. But pretending takes more energy than being alone. So I came out here instead. The trees don't ask questions. The lake doesn't care who you love." I felt my chest tighten, like my ribs were shrinking around something that had just woken up inside me. "I like it here," I whispered. Logan looked at me then. Really looked. Not with curiosity or confusion, but with something softer. Understanding. Maybe even knowing. "Yeah," he said, voice low. "Me too." And in the silence that followed, with only the fire to keep time, I felt a shift. Something unspoken settling between us, not heavy, but real. Morning arrived wrapped in mist. It clung to the lake like a veil, soft and almost sacred. The sun hadn't risen fully, just a pale smear of gold behind the tree line, and everything was still, quiet enough to hear the low, haunting call of a loon echoing across the water. I stood barefoot on the dock, the wood damp and cool beneath my feet, watching the world wake up. Logan emerged from the cabin behind me, already dressed in flannel and waders, holding 2 rods over his shoulder. He handed one to me without a word, his eyes crinkling with the kind of smile that doesn't need sound. Together, we climbed into the small aluminum boat tethered to the dock and drifted out, oars slicing gently through the mirrored surface. We didn't talk much, and for once, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. It was a good silence, wide and alive, the kind you settle into like a favorite sweater. Logan cast his line and leaned back, his eyes scanning the treetops. I mimicked his motion, though mine landed with a splash that made him grin. "Easy," he said, leaning forward. "You've got the right rhythm. Just need to let the line glide." He moved behind me, his hand sliding over my shoulder to steady it. His palm rested there a second longer than necessary, fingers brushing my collarbone as he guided my motion. The warmth of his touch, even through the layers of fabric, sent something sharp and electric through me. I swallowed hard, pretending to focus on the line, but I wasn't. I was focused on him. On the way he moved, slow and deliberate, on the veins in his forearms, the sun catching in the silver at his temples, on how his voice, deep and quiet, made the air feel heavier around me. I'd never really let myself think about a man like that before. Not seriously, not outside of the privacy of dreams or stray thoughts I crushed down before they could bloom, but here, in the middle of a fog-draped lake, with Logan's hand still ghosting across my back. It was harder to lie to myself. A gust of wind rippled the water, and then the sky cracked open with a sudden, clean downpour rain. It came fast and without warning, turning the air cold and sharp. "Shit," Logan laughed, already reeling in his line. "We're about to get drenched." We scrambled, fumbling for the oars, water already soaking through our clothes. By the ESO, time we hit the dock. We were both laughing, breathless and dripping. I don't remember the last time I laughed like that, without thinking about how I looked or who was watching. Inside, we peeled off wet clothes by the door, shivering and gasping. Logan grabbed 2 towels, tossing one to me before heading toward the bedroom to change. I stripped down to my boxers and wrapped the towel around my waist, my skin humming with adrenaline and something else I didn't want to name yet. When Logan came back, he wore dry jeans and a soft gray shirt that clung to him in places it didn't before. His hair was still damp, curling slightly at the edges. He froze for a second when he saw me, his eyes catching, just briefly, on the bare skin of my chest, then trailing lower. It was a flicker. A hesitation, but I saw it. He looked away quickly, clearing his throat. "There's more clothes in the closet if you need something warm." I nodded, heart thudding, every nerve tuned to the space between us. The silence returned, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't empty anymore. It was charged, thick with questions neither of us had asked and answers we weren't ready to give. The kind of silence that doesn't press you to speak, only to feel. And in that moment, with rain tapping on the windows and the scent of pine in the air, I knew something had shifted again. I just didn't know if it was in him or in me. The storm rolled in like a living thing. It started with distant grumbles, low, yawning thunder that rumbled across the lake and made the windows tremble in their frames. Rain came soon after, fat drops slapping the tin roof, soft at first, then harder, until the cabin seemed to breathe with it, groaning and sighing like it was remembering something. I couldn't sleep. I lay on the couch in the main room, a heavy quilt tangled around my legs, staring up at the dark ceiling beams while thoughts circled like moths around a light. Every second I spent near Logan made my chest tighten and my stomach twist, not out of fear, at least not entirely, but out of a longing I didn't have the tools to name yet. Lightning split the sky, and the room flashed white for a moment. Then came the thunder, loud and sudden, making my heart leap. I got up and padded barefoot into the kitchen, wrapping my arms around myself. The storm felt like it had cracked something open inside me. Like all the pieces I'd tried so hard to hold together were finally starting to slip. I didn't expect Logan to be there. He was standing at the counter in sweatpants and a dark t-shirt, pouring hot water over a tea bag, his hair messy, his face drawn. He looked at me like he'd already been expecting me. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly. I shook my head. He gestured toward the table. "Sit. I'll make you some." I slid into the wooden chair while he prepared a second mug. When he brought it over, our fingers brushed, and I felt that spark again, that quiet gravity between us that neither of us had dared speak about. For a while, we didn't say anything, just listened to the storm howl through the trees. "I knew," Logan said finally, his voice low, "even before you got in the truck. I saw it in the way you looked at the world, like you were trying to pass for someone else." I didn't look at him. My throat was thick, my hands clenched around the warm mug. "I used to be the same," he continued. "Spent years thinking I could beat it out of myself. Pretended. Played the game. Dated women. Smiled at the right times. But inside, it was always there. The weight of pretending. A lump rose in my throat, and before I could stop it, the tears came. Hot, fast, and quiet. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be," I whispered. "I feel like I'm broken, like if people really saw me, they'd walk away." Logan's chair scraped softly against the floor as he moved closer. I didn't look up, even when I felt his hand on my shoulder, gentle, grounding. "You're not broken," he said. "You're just scared, and that's okay. This world doesn't make it easy to be soft or honest. I can't talk to my parents or Jake. I don't even know if I'll ever be able to." "You will," he said, "when it's right. But until then, you've got me." That's when I broke completely. I turned toward him and buried my face in his chest. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me in like it was the most natural thing in the world. Not romantic, not sexual, just human, just safe. I could feel the slow, steady rhythm of his heart beneath my cheek, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself cry. Really cry. Not the quiet kind behind closed doors, but the ugly, aching sobs that shake your ribs and leave you hollow. He didn't try to hush me, didn't rush me, just held me like someone who'd been there, who knew what it felt like to shatter in secret. "You're not alone," he whispered eventually, one hand in my hair, the other resting lightly on my back. "Not here. Not anymore." And somehow, in the middle of a storm that had woken every ghost in my chest, those 4 words made everything quiet again. Not fixed, not finished, but quiet. I pulled back eventually, eyes swollen, heart slower now. Logan gave me a small smile, gentle, steady. "Thanks," I said, my voice raw. He nodded once, like it didn't need to be said. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to hide. Not from the storm, not from him, not from myself. The morning after the storm felt like something had been washed clean. Light filtered through the trees in thin, golden beams, catching on dust motes and warming the wooden floorboards. The rain had stopped sometime during the night, leaving everything outside damp and green and impossibly quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a truth is spoken. Fragile, but somehow whole. Logan was already up, standing at the stove in the same faded shirt from the night before, flipping pancakes like it. Was the most ordinary morning in the world. "Sleep okay?" he asked without turning around. "Yeah," I said, voice a little scratchy. "Thanks. For last night." He nodded slowly. You were honest. That's brave. There was a soft awkwardness between us now. Not uncomfortable, just careful. Like we were walking on a frozen lake, testing which parts would hold. Logan didn't hover or push. He moved more slowly now, more deliberately, like he was giving me room to decide what came next. Even his eyes had changed. No longer guarded, but open. Quietly watching, gently waiting. After breakfast, he asked if I wanted to go for a hike. I said yes before I even thought about it. The trail behind the cabin climbed into the hills, winding through dense forest and over mossy ridge lines. The sun had broken through by then, warming the dirt path and bringing steam off the wet leaves. Birds called overhead, branches snapped underfoot. Every now and then, Logan would stop to point something out. A deer print in the mud, a claw mark on a tree, a patch of mushrooms nestled under a log. "You see this?" he asked, gesturing to a notch carved into the bark of a birch tree. Trail, sign. Used to mark the way when paths weren't mapped. 2 slashes mean you're going uphill. 1 slash says you're headed home. I traced the lines with my finger, the bark rough beneath my skin. So, the forest kind of speaks if you know how to listen, he smiled. Exactly. It felt like he was talking about more than the trail. Like the woods were a metaphor we were walking through together. Both of us learning how to read signs, how to navigate change, how to find a way forward without a map. Later, we reached a ridge that overlooked the lake. It sparkled below us, framed by pine and sky, untouched by the storm now long past. We stood there in silence, side by side, catching our breath. Logan sat down on a flat rock, elbows resting on his knees, eyes distant. "I used to come up here with someone," he said after a moment. "A long time ago." I looked at him, but he didn't return the gaze. Just stared out over the water. He was kind, smart, knew how to cook fish over an open flame without turning it to ash. He made this place feel bigger somehow, like the silence wasn't so loud when he was around. He didn't say the man's name. He didn't have to. "What happened?" I asked gently. Logan took a breath, long and slow. "I got scared. He wanted something I wasn't ready to give. Truth. Permanence. I couldn't picture my life outside of hiding, so I let him go." His voice cracked at the end, but he didn't apologize for it. "I still come up here," he added. "Sometimes I think he's still around, in the trees, in the wind." I didn't know what to say, so I just sat next to him. When we started back down the ridge, the trail grew narrow, and we moved in single file. At one point, I stumbled over a root, catching myself on a branch. Logan turned and reached for me, steadying my arm. We were close again, close enough to feel the warmth between us. Our hands brushed, fingers lingered. I didn't pull away, and neither did he. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession. But it was something. A turn in the trail, a step forward, a choice, and I made it. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the cabin windows, stripes of gold stretching across the floor. Everything was quiet except for the creak of old wood and the soft rustle of breeze through the pines outside. Logan sat on the couch, guitar across his lap, tuning it slowly. His fingers moved with the kind of casual grace that only came from repetition. I watched from the armchair, the way the fading light caught on the curve of his jaw, how the strings hummed under his touch. "Want to learn?" he asked, glancing up. I hesitated, then nodded. He patted the spot beside him, and I crossed the room on unsure legs. The couch dipped under my weight, and suddenly we were sitting close. Close enough for our knees to touch. Close enough that I could feel the warmth of him in the small space between our bodies. He handed me the guitar, then gently adjusted how I held it. "Rest it here, just above your leg. Yeah, like that. Try this chord, G major. His fingers slid over mine, adjusting my grip, pressing lightly. The calluses on his fingertips felt rough, grounding. My heart pounded loud in my ears, but I didn't pull away. Now strum. Let it breathe. I brushed the strings. It sounded clumsy, but Logan smiled. Not bad. You've got a feel for it. We played like that for a while. Him showing, me fumbling, both of us laughing softly when I got it wrong. The light outside began to dim, and the cabin filled with that dusky glow that made everything feel dreamlike. At one point, his hand rested over mine, guiding a chord change. I looked up. He was already looking at me. Neither of us said anything. The guitar slid quietly from my lap to the cushion between us. My hand stayed in his. My breath caught, and then I leaned in, slow, questioning, heart trembling in my chest. Our lips met like a whisper. It wasn't fireworks. It wasn't heat and hunger. It was quiet and cautious, like neither of us knew how to move or breathe, like we were afraid the wrong motion would shatter everything we'd built. I pulled back just an inch, my breath shaking. Is this okay? Logan looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. Surprise, yes, but also something older. Something buried. I need you to be sure, he said gently. Not because you're grateful, or lonely, or confused. I nodded, already knowing the answer in my chest. I've never been more sure of anything. He exhaled, then leaned in and kissed me back. This time, it was different. Still soft, but deeper. Like he was allowing himself to feel it now. Really, feel it. Years of silence, of denial, of what-ifs poured into that moment. His hand came up to cradle my jaw, and I sank into the touch like I'd been waiting my whole life to be seen like this. The kiss deepened but stayed slow. No rush, no urgency, just presence. Intensity wrapped in gentleness. The quiet ache of two people who'd gone too long without this kind of truth. His forehead rested against mine when we finally pulled apart. I felt his breath on my lips, warm and steady. We don't have to rush anything, he whispered. We can just be. I nodded again, unable to speak past the thrum in my chest. Outside, the crickets began their nightly song. Inside, the guitar lay forgotten, strings humming softly from where it had been set down. And in the growing dark, with nothing but the sound of our breathing and the echo of music between us, we let the silence hold us. Together, fade to black. The sunrise came in slow through the trees, casting ribbons of light across the wooden floor. Everything outside glistened with dew, and the lake was smooth like glass, barely a ripple in sight. The storm was long gone, but something in the air still felt hushed, like the forest was holding its breath. Inside the cabin, it was warm, quiet. Logan stood at the stove flipping eggs while I buttered toast. It was such a simple thing, mundane even, but every second felt steeped in something new. He looked over his shoulder at me and smiled, that same quiet smile I'd started to recognize as his real one, not the one he wore for strangers or family. The one that said, I see you. We moved around each other easily, without speaking much. Just the soft scrape of plates, the sizzle of the pan, the smell of breakfast filling the space between us. There were no grand declarations, no morning after, awkwardness, just a calm, steady rhythm, like we'd been doing this for years. But as I stood there pouring coffee, I realized the truth. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. I still didn't know what I was supposed to do next. I still had to go back to my life, to Jake, to the version of me I'd been pretending to be. But for the first time, that life didn't feel like a trap. It felt like a starting point. Logan handed me a plate and leaned against the counter, his eyes soft but serious. You know, he said, when you leave this place, it might feel heavier out there, like you have to fold yourself up again. I Didn't answer. I just looked down at my food, suddenly unsure of what to say. But I want you to remember something, he added. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that makes them more comfortable. I met his eyes. You're safe here, he said, always. And in that moment, with the sun rising behind him and the scent of pine drifting in through the open window, I believed him. Even if the world wasn't ready for me yet, he was. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.